I was so convincing, the guy takes me to his house in the Yonkers. Takes out a bottle of my favorite. I don't think of these cases, never talk about them. So, Chevez lays it out. Me and him knock out this bottle. He's checking me out. I'm checking him out. And I actually made a bad mistake. We're drinking. So we're talking to each other, and he goes like this, you know what, Artie, you look like a cop to me. I went, dude, you look like the cop. He whips out a New York City Silver Shield. He was a cop. It was a police officer. And the mistake I made, you're on the job?
Can you introduce yourself for me, please?
My name is Arthur Walter Scalzo, Jr., and I am soon to be 73. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, married. I have 4 kids, 5 grandkids, and the best thing I ever did in my life was having my kids.
Art, you've had a long and storied career, and we're going to go over that, but what was... who'd you spend the most time with? What was the agency that you...
The DEA.
DEA. And how long did you work with DEA?
I guess about 22 years.
22 years. Tell me a little bit about growing up. Where'd you grow up?
Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
And then it was about 910 Long Island, suburbs of the greater New York metropolitan area.
Okay. And what years were that?
I think we moved out to the island. Again, I was born in 52 and lived in Brooklyn until 60.
Okay.
And then moved out to Deer Park, Long Island. And I lived there until I enlisted in the Army, and that was in 1971.
How was New York back in those days?
I mean, it was interesting, like in the movies. You know, everyone was prim and proper. Every dinner you had at the house with family, everyone was in a suit. Everyone was smoking. Ladies all had wonderful dresses on. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think I had a cool childhood. New York was interesting. An Italian family in New York was extremely interesting.
Yeah.
Everybody spoke like I speak and had that New York accent, and that was the center of my universe. You know, every Sunday, dinner at grandma's and poker game after. Dinner started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You were never late for dinner. And all the grown-ups had dinner in the big room. All the kids were in the kitchen, and I was the oldest grandson.
What'd your dad do for a living?
My dad was a salesman, and he was a full-of-brush salesman. And he was a World War II veteran. He was a combat engineer in the Pacific. He was, my dad was my hero. You know, I didn't expect this.
Yeah, no,
my dad was my hero, and he gave us a good life. He was a volunteer fireman. He tragically died of a heart attack at 44.
How old were you when he died?
I was 14, yeah.
14.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right in the middle of the formative years and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Thanksgiving Day with the whole family, 70 people, 60, 70 people. And we just got off the table. He sat on the couch and boom, he died. Massive heart attack.
Wow.
It was terrible. Yeah, my uncle was actually one of my mentors was my Uncle George. He was a New York City detective, narcotics. And I was a Boy Scout. And here's my uncle and I working on my father to save him, which we didn't do. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but everything in life is a learning lesson. And, you know, my mom was widowed, 36, I think.
So tell me, did you have one sister?
I had an older sister that I never met. She died shortly after birth. I came to Earth about a year later.
Okay, so, but I thought it was interesting, basically in high school. So how old were you when you get your first full-time job and you're basically helping support your mom and your sister at this point?
Yeah, I against my will, my mom and dad decided that I should go to Catholic high school. We moved out to Long Island, again, 61, I believe. and I had great friends, and it was just a good place to grow up, to get me out of Brooklyn, basically. Brooklyn had good influences and certainly bad influences, and my mom and dad recognized that. So we moved out to Long Island, and we lived in the house, and it was the suburbs. You know, my father was a GI Bill. I think he paid $12,000 for the house. Pretty cool. But against my will, I had to go to Catholic high school, and I fought that tooth and nail, as they say. But again, it was it was Holy Family Diocesan High School. There was no sophomore, junior, seniors. We were always the seniors. That was pretty cool. And so I started high school, September of '66. And then Thanksgiving Day, '66, my father passed away. So I was a paper boy at the time. I also worked at a candy store, putting Sunday newspapers together. And my life certainly changed. My dad, who was a full brush salesman, he finally made it. And back then, it was called the aluminum siding and aluminum windows came into being. And it was an industry that boomed as the years went on. And one of the first companies on Long Island, the name of it was Cardinal Construction. They hired my dad as a salesman, and within a year he was a partner. And you know, they did a structured arrangement. You know, he cashed in his GI life insurance policy. Every dime my mom and dad had went into becoming a partner, and then he had to pay the two partners back. And yeah, and that was a tragedy. A year later, he passed away, and he left us in bad shape. The partners did not do the right thing, and that was another learning lesson in life. But my dad's two brothers, my Uncle Bill and my Uncle Teddy, they were an important part of my life, obviously. And Uncle Teddy had a friend in Deer Park, an Italian immigrant, and he got me a job to work in the deli. And it started off part-time, but quickly, rapidly evolved into a full-time job. I was a deli boy.
How old were you?
I was 14.
Did you have some sort of, I mean, your dad passes away, was not necessarily obligation, but did you feel like a responsibility even at 14 to go, hey, I've got to really step up here?
Yes. Jesus. You're a blubbering idiot.
It's all good.
It really affected my mom terribly. She lost the love of her life.
Yeah.
And my sister and I are now fatherless.
Right.
First person in our family other than my mom, my dad's mom, who passed away 3 years earlier on Thanksgiving Day at a relatively young age. And the burden of my dad dying, how it affected my mom, you know, I immediately became the man of the family. And it wasn't by anyone's prodding. I love my mom. I love my dad, my sister.
Yeah.
And I'm in a situation where things are tough for us financially. And I am a hard worker, always have been. And I went to work in the delicatessen, going to school full-time as a freshman in high school. And then it evolved into a real job. I think I was 16, 17. I actually became the manager. And I went less and less to school because I made more money working, but I had a brain. I could take a test. And the nuns and Father Walden, or his name popped in, they recognized the fact that his kid doesn't have a dad, and this kid is working hard. So they monitored me, I would say, closely, but I didn't go to school that much. I cut out.
Yeah.
You know, and I would get out of school and, you know, and find a way back to Deer Park, and, you know, the bus took us back and forth. But then when I turned 16, I had a car. And yeah, no, it was an interesting childhood, but I still had a good childhood. I had great friends, and you just, Deer Park was a wonderful place to grow up. The Brooklyn family, they would come out. My mom was a great cook. Yeah. So I had it, but my life changed, and back then, you had to be strong, especially if your dad passed away at that age. And there were only two kids in my high school. Peter Smith, he was the first one to lose his dad, and me. And Peter Smith's father was the janitor for the high school, Holy Family. So it was shocking. We were all young. Our fathers were young, so we kind of stood out.
Yeah.
But, no one cut me slack. Still had a pass, but when I say no one cut me slack, it's a contradiction because they did. Yeah. So, they wouldn't call up my mother saying, your son's a truant. They understood. And again, I took my tests, passed, got my high school diploma, and yeah.
So your dad is World War II. You have two uncles, World War II, greatest generation. How much, even though you're only 14, I've got to assume that you said you're a hard worker from the very beginning. Was it the values, obviously, that your dad and your mom instilled in?
Absolutely. My mom and my dad were the biggest influence in my life. Absolutely. Family members are family members, and everyone has a story. But my godfather was Uncle Bill. He was a great man. He was a good mentor. And I really respected him. And my Uncle George, New York City cop. But it was just kind of weird that I probably had expectations that I felt weren't fulfilled from the whole family, both sides. But that only made me more of a man. And, and we're modest people, humble, and you don't ask people for anything, and it should come out from the heart where you don't have to be asked. I don't wait for someone to ask me for a favor.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
I always offer first. One of my traits, and I know me. And my mom was a very proud woman, very strong, and she would never, ever ask for help. So.
Was there something, what did you want to do as a kid?
I wanted to be a fireman.
Oh.
My father was a volunteer fireman.
Okay.
In Deer Park.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And he would get up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Back then it was different. A long time ago, the phone would ring. There was a central station in the town of Babylon. And my father would get up, and he had a blue light, and he'd put it on his dashboard, and the firehouse was about a half a mile away. And yeah, and again, I was indoctrinated at an early age with serving our country. Douglas MacArthur was my boyhood hero, and John Wayne. And, one the real deal, the other one an actor, but John Wayne was a patriot.
Yeah.
That being said, I then, go into the firehouse, meeting the firemen, and it was all pretty cool because it was back in the day, and everybody was family-like. My mom was a great cook, and she would cook for my father's company. And my mom did that for me when I became a volunteer fireman before I enlisted in the Army. Yeah, the day I turned 18, I became a fireman, and quick training, it was basically on-the-job training. But yeah, it was pretty cool, and I was working full-time. So, again, I think I was indoctrinated in serving the public because at a very young age, I saved a couple of lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought that was wonderful.
So if you're working as a fireman, what makes you in 71 join the Army then? Because
it was during the Vietnam War. I wanted to go to Vietnam. My uncles stopped me from enlisting in 1970. I was first going to enlist in the Marine Corps, and my Uncle Teddy, a Marine, I made the mistake of telling him, and he talked me out of it and said something pretty interesting. Because I always looked like it was the best thing ever happened to me. I hated the Marine Corps every day. And when you're impressionable, you do listen to the seniors who you do respect. And I did, and I was impressionable. And then I wanted to be an Army helicopter pilot, and I signed up for that at 17 to go. The Army still has the program, warrant officer program. But I made a mistake and told another uncle that. So to answer your question is that I wanted to go in the military. I wanted to go to West Point, but that was out of the question because of my circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And I wind up enlisting because it was just, I had to do it. And my mom understood.
Yeah.
Freaked her out. But, leaving my mom and my sister, my God, that was horrible. I didn't know the effect it had on my mom. And I didn't know the effect of my life story had on my mom until my son went to war and he did 2 tours in Iraq. Then I realized all those years later, the effect I had on my mom in doing what I did in my life's work. And I understood it. I also understood the value of a service family.
So was there any hesitation? I mean, you're there, you're taking care of your sister and your mom essentially. But you have this drive, this need to go serve. Was there any concern in your mind about, maybe something's going to happen to you and then it's just going to be your mom and your sister? Any concern about that at that age, or you just had this drive to just go serve?
I didn't think in those terms that anything was ever going to happen to me.
Yeah.
I got hurt as a fireman, volunteer fireman. I got hurt pretty serious. I almost lost my eye. But I really didn't think in those terms. I just loved it. It was my thing. And when I was a good deli boy, the deli and the environment, they wanted to send me to college and then send me to law school. But again, I wanted to serve our country.
Yeah.
I had friends now who had gone to Vietnam and came back. I had a friend who was killed in action, came back. They were older than me, a year or 2 older. My age, no one my age was killed in action in Vietnam. But it's just something I wanted to do.
So you end up, you join the Army in 71. In 73, you end up getting married to your high school sweetheart?
Yes.
Are you still in the Army at that point?
Yes. When we were married, I was out. I stayed in the reserves, and but I was in the reserves. Got married on September 1st, 74, 1 year after I was discharged, and active duty. And then and then I immediately went to college, back into college. And then I got the job offer from the Secret Service in June of 74. And they put me through all of the process, interview, testing. And I was accepted into it. It was the uniform division of the United States Secret Service. And then it was called the Executive Protective Service. And that evolved into the uniform division while I was an officer, and picked up a good idea of what the Secret Service was about. I graduated from college 3 years later, and then I knew I wanted to be an agent. I always knew. I was thinking about going into the CIA, but I realized that's not what I wanted. And I wanted to be a DEA agent by then.
Okay, well, let me ask you something. So you start with Secret Service. After you get out, at what point do you decide, instead of going back to, say, being a fireman and doing service, at what point do you decide to go into law enforcement?
By the time I'm in law enforcement, I've already been in the military. I'm in law enforcement. I'm enjoying it. And the Secret Service Uniform Division is an interesting job, back then especially, because it was recently created under President Nixon. Well, it was always the White House Police. And then the White House Police was strictly former D.C. cops who had just lateraled from the D.C. Police Department into the White House police, and we always stayed in the White House retirement system. The DC police retirement system. I was always in the DC police retirement system, and I was actually going into the DC police, so it was a matter of which one to take. EPS called me, and you don't turn down a job. And I went there, and I realized, all right, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to have my bachelor's degree, and I'm a Fed now. And I was assigned to the Foreign Mission Division.
But wait a minute. But when you were with Army, were you doing law enforcement there?
No.
Okay, so my question is, how do you decide when you get out of the Army? How do you decide that law enforcement is what you want to do?
Simply stated, I was in the Foreign Mission Division, and we had concurrent jurisdiction. So we were uniformed on a scooter.
Oh, okay.
We looked like DC cops. We had the power of DC cops. We could give tickets like DC cops. And I was an arrest-making EPS officer. I had full jurisdiction. And I was disciplined for making arrests. My first big arrest was an armed robbery. I made several armed robberies on the street in DC. Yeah, guy with a shotgun, guy with a .45. Armed robberies. Yeah, pretty cool when you're 23 years old.
Yeah.
And I realized, and I was good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, again, all of the sergeants, the street sergeants, were all former Washington, D.C. police with a chip on their shoulder because they were the real cops.
Yeah.
And we weren't, we were the Secret Service police. But I became a real cop real quick.
Was there always a sense, even back then, that DEA was the agency you wanted to go to?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Why?
Because my uncle, who became a narc in NYPD, most of his men, many of his men, back in '73 when the DEA was formed, they went to the newly created task force in New York City. So many of his guys went in. He told me about that. And now I'm a veteran. I'm discharged from the Army. And we talked. He was one of my favorite uncles, and I really respected him. And he really took me hunting first, and I became a great shot. I mean, my God, I was #1 in my Secret Service class. I was #1 in DEA. I shared #1 in DEA, but I was a good shot.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
What did your uncle teach you that made you a good shot?
He just told me about being a narc in New York City.
No, but in terms of being a good shot, though, what were the fundamentals that he taught you?
That's a wonderful question. The fundamentals were his 38 was on his dresser. He still lived at home. Korean War veteran, by the way, hero. Yeah, Korean War veteran, hero, infantry. I took his weapon without his permission. I lifted it up. He goes, "What are you doing?" I'm taking a look. He goes, "You never pick up a weapon without permission." So put it back. He opened it up, took the bullets out. He said, "You ever," and I'm young. This is before the Army. Before the Army. Yeah, definitely. And he goes, "You're interested in it?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "You ever fire a pistol?" I said, "A pellet gun." He goes, "I know you fired a rifle." So he said, "Let me tell you all about it." So he gave me a quick, on a real pistol. And I was like, wow. Half hour, the fundamentals, which I'm a firearms instructor. I'm also an NRA instructor, pistols, rifles, and the fundamentals, which I still know to this day. But when I left active duty, of course, he goes, "Well, what are you going to do?" So I didn't tell him anything about the CIA because I was sworn. And he goes, "Look, think about the DEA, NYPD." Yes, I've taken all the tests. I'm waiting to get called. So I get called by the Secret Service. And now I am I'm a federal law enforcement officer. And I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Well, okay, so
And I was actually called by the city, Suffolk County and Nassau County, because I always followed up with taking the physicals and everything. I'd drive back to New York, but I already had federal time invested.
Yeah.
Your military and
Right.
and Secret Service. And then common sense was starting to populate my head. With you know, and okay, yeah, the feds is what I'm going to do, which is ironic. I became a New York cop detective years later.
Yeah. If DEA was always your goal, what you end up going to INS for a brief period of time. Why?
Good question. That's my habit to say that. Good question. I don't think you're going to ask me a bad question.
I hope not, but I'm sure somebody will tell me that.
But I knew how hard it was to become a DEA agent. Back then, there were not that many agents. And I think 1,800 at the time, you know, and then, you know, I was in class 15. So it was really tough to get the job. And I had been applying to DEA expecting my degree, but had not been called for an interview. So I knew language would be a benefit. So I knew that the secret, I was hired by a couple other agencies to be an 1811, but I knew INS would teach you Spanish. It's mandatory. And you actually, it was a big part of the 6 months of training. And I was one of the first classes at Plessy. And so again, I haunted the INS in uniform, parking my police scooter outside. I would weekly, if not biweekly, I would go in to check on their board vacancies. And it was the deputy director of the local INS office. I haven't told this story. I haven't thought of this story in so many years. He, officer, can I help you? I said, yes, sir. I have I just recently got my bachelor's degree, and I'm applying for agent jobs. And I'd like to be an INS agent. Come on to my office. So went in his office. I had my helmet on. I had my, I think it was my red warning, safety jacket on. He said, sit down. Like a cup of coffee? I said, yes, sir. Sir. And he's giving me the time of day. And he goes, I appreciate talking with you. And I probably just saw him in passing. Hello, sir. He says, how are you doing, Officer Scalzo? And he was instrumental in me getting the INS job.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Huh.
Yeah.
So how long are you with INS?
2 years.
2 years, and then you end up getting hired by the DEA. You get your goal in 1979.
Yes, sir.
How does it work at that point? Because do you get hired out of the New York office, or where do you get hired and where do you get stationed?
By this time, I'm applying directly to the Detroit regional office.
Okay.
Was it in Detroit or Chicago? It might have been the Chicago regional office that included Cleveland. So my application is no longer being reviewed in New York.
Okay.
Now it's because New York was my goal to go to.
Right.
But now I'm an agent in Cleveland, INS. So I get called in for an interview. And also the rack of DEA, Chuck, I'll tell you his last name. He just passed away. What a good guy. I actually started doing undercover work for the DEA.
As an INS agent?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Not many, but definitely. And Chuck Carter. He took a liking to me, and also I made real good friends with a DEA agent, Artie Goldenbaum. Art Goldenbaum. He was an FBN agent, and Art's a good guy. We became very close, and we were running and gunning, as they say, cases working cases together, developing informants. So
Because by that time, you're an INS agent.
I'm an INS agent.
You're an INS agent. So when you get hired on with DEA and you go through the academy and stuff, at that point, did they change the process where you couldn't ever go back to the place that you were hired?
I was no,
Because
that came about years later.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm an INS agent.
Uh-huh.
I'm hired by the DEA.
Yep.
I get sent. It's a good story. Good question. My class was so many veterans, multiple law enforcement careers. I'm saying 75, 80% of us were Army, Marine, Navy veterans. By this time now, I'm the graduate of 2 law enforcement academies. I'm 27 years old. We're all pretty experienced guys at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I did pretty well at the academy. So I had volunteered to go to New York because you get your cheat sheet, your 3 choices.
Mm-hmm.
New York, New York, New York, but New York was number 1. And then I get called in. The day that they're going to give us our assignments, they give me Charleston, South Carolina, Iraq office. The guy next to me, Dennis Craig, Southern boy. He's on the phone with his wife because we're in the room, multiple phones, and he starts begging his wife not to leave him. And I'm saying to myself, what the heck? Because they gave him New York City. So he gets off the phone with his wife. I come up to him. I said, hey, Dennis, listen, how about we go to the bosses? I really want to go to New York City. Let's see if we can swap. He goes, you do that for me? I go, yeah, I do that for you. Because I was pretty respected in the academy. And, and I have a voice and I'm experienced. So I said, well, there's a caveat to it. He goes, what's that? I says, I'm doing a big favor for you. I said, so my favorite drink is Chivas. I said, you have to send me a bottle of Chivas for the rest of your career. He hugs me. I went and spoke to the, the head of our class.
Yeah.
And they made it happen. True story.
That's interesting, Art, because, I can think in this day and age, well, and maybe not in this, I can think in my day and age, if somebody would have gone in, they would have said, suck it up. You're going to go to where we tell you to go.
They did it for him.
Yeah.
True story.
Wow.
It was Mr. Mulharick, Special Agent Mulharick. He was the academic unit chief. And again, I did pretty well in the basic agent school.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a New Yorker.
Yeah.
I know Manhattan like the back of my hand. Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx.
Right.
I talk it, I walk it. I'm a New Yorker.
Yeah.
And that's where I truly learned my trade as a special agent in New York City. My first assignment was Group 7 under the command of Jack Toll, who didn't talk to me for 6 months.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Just because he wanted you to prove yourself?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And my partner was Julio Mercado.
Group 7, what are you guys working on?
We were working on heroin, cocaine, and we were also the Klan lab. No training whatsoever.
Really?
Yeah.
Even back then?
No training whatsoever. Running and gunning, doing labs, just making arrests. The Italians got involved in meth manufacturing. Al Cavuto, he was the coordinator. Great agent.
Any protective gear back then?
No.
Okay.
Brother, at times we didn't even wear our bulletproof vests.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, so what handgun are you assigned with when you graduated?
357 Magnum.
357.
Yeah, the blue.
Before I forget to ask you, because I always ask the DEA guys this, tell me, was there a difference? Did you notice a difference? Because when I went through, and we're going to talk about later on when you're back at the academy, DEA is a very militaristic academy, and FBI seems very collegiate-like. Did you notice a difference even back then?
Well, no. Why? Because we didn't do anything with them other than the firearms range. No, not even then. We did all the training DEA at DEA headquarters on High Street.
Oh, so you weren't even at Quantico at that point.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that all came later.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we did all our training. Chuck, what the hell was Chuck's last name? He wasn't an agent, but he was the firearms instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was back in the day. It was at the old Treasury range, which I had been to many times in the Secret Service. We had to qualify in the Secret Service once a month. Yeah, and that's really enhanced my shooting abilities. But,
Okay, so let me ask you this, because I've asked a couple people this. I've talked to some Secret Service guys, I've talked to INS, and I've obviously talked to different agency agents. Overwhelmingly, every time I talk to somebody, they always think that Secret Service and INS typically develop the best shots. Do you think that that's true?
definitely Secret Service. I would say at FLETC, Brunswick, Georgia, it was more than adequate.
What do you think Secret Service does that makes them good shots?
Qualifying every month, a little round target in the Treasury's basement once a month. Yeah, no doubt.
Huh.
Yeah, and a good course of, yeah, and also qualification was at the in the Treasury basement, but Beltsville was also the Secret Service's academy to this day. And so, yeah, we went out, we spent many months at Beltsville in the Secret Service. And then once we, first was FLETC at the Treasury building to go through the criminal investigators course, and then in the Secret Service, and then out to Beltsville for the firearms portion of it. So
when you get to New York, you've already been doing undercover at INS. When you get to New York as a DEA agent, are you doing a lot of undercover?
Yes.
Okay. Did you like doing undercover?
Loved it.
Why?
The best teacher ever was Julio Mercado. Jack Toll teamed us up in the beginning. He was in the class before me. I'm an Italian kid from Brooklyn. He's a Puerto Rican kid from the Bronx. He was in the Marines. He was in the task force as a Silver Shield. He wasn't even a detective. Back then, it was tough to get a detective's badge. But we hit it off. We talk once a week. You know, we love each other. And he was the go-to undercover guy. And then, again, I like undercover work.
But why? Why do you like undercover?
Well, you get to act, number one. You really have to, every word you say, you cannot make a mistake. You're dealing with killers, monsters, horrible, horrible human beings. You know, and you have to be careful, and you have to be convincing that you are a horrible human being. And for some reason, I was good at that. So I go to Julio. Because, again, now, he's my partner. He's doing a lot of undercover work, and I'm covering him. I said, Julio, I want to have some fun, too. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I want to start going undercover. He goes, okay. He had a real good informant. And he goes, all right. So I meet the informant. I'll remember his name. That was Julio's number one guy. In fact, I'm not going to say his name. And so we sit down. Oh, this is a good story. I brief them on who the bad guys are, and the bad guys are Puerto Ricans from the Bronx. My first meeting is going to be in Manhattan at a Spanish place. And the informant introduced me to the Spanish guy. His first name, the bad guy, was Felix. I believe Felix Angel. So we meet. Meeting goes very well. Again, my undercover role was I was a wise guy from Brooklyn, and I had a lot of experience based on my childhood growing up. Yeah, I used to see the wise guys all the time, and that's how it was, so I knew the language, the lingo. And after the meeting went so well, Felix goes, meet me by the projects. There was the projects in Manhattan. So I meet him in the projects in Manhattan, comes down, and he fronts me an ounce of heroin, pure heroin. That's unheard of. And that, an ounce in OZ went for like 10 grand back then.
Wow.
A kilo, 200,000. So Tom Cash was our ASAC. And Tom, great boss, he was our ASAC. Julio was the only cover. There was no other group members because it just happened. It was supposed to be just a meeting. Went so well. It was a Friday night also. It went so well. Now I have an ounce of dope. My first buy in New York. Julio, very proud. We're processing it back in at the group. It's late at night now. Tom Cash walks in. Hey, boss, how you doing? Julio goes, he scored. Ounce of dope, boss. He just looked and goes, that was true story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, and then it just took off after that. I loved it.
Every New Yorker I talk to has a gift for gab. You clearly can tell a story, and I think I can imagine you being very comfortable undercover. Where do you think that comes from? What do you think it is in the New York culture that allows people to just tell stories and just kind of?
First of all, growing up in the Bronx, growing up in Brooklyn, Long Island, you develop how it is on the street. Every family was basically, no one was rich. No one. Quite the opposite. Many of our fathers, World War II veterans. It was different then where you were allowed to play in the neighborhood, 6 years old. You're running and you come home and nothing happened. That's how it was. The neighborhood took care of its own.
Yeah.
Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst, and PS 131. The neighborhood watched. Everyone watched. One end of the street was a synagogue. St. Catherine's was at the other. And I remember my house. It was a cool house. It was what did they call it? A railroad flat. You walked in the front door, and then you walked through one room, 3 rooms, but common hallway. And you developed how to survive, stay away from the bad people. You were taught the warning signs really early by just the families at the table. You know who was who at a young age. So that all lent to the streetwise.
Yeah.
Being a city kid,
yeah.
Hanging out, getting into a fight, getting pushed into a fight. But being a DEA in New York City, what a great education, and being a great agent, being a good agent. You don't have informants? Sit on any drug corner.
Yeah.
You'll see dope deals. Make a collar. Take the dope. Keep it in your being honest, making an informant. And then making cases.
Yeah. So in 83, you end up, do you get transferred to Long Island?
83, yeah.
Why did they transfer you?
So 80, 81, 82, and part of 83, Group 7 is a very productive group in New York City. Jack had been transferred as a 14, I believe it was, to the West Palm Beach office.
Mm-hmm.
Like totally against his will. And Jack Taylor, he took over the group. Good boss. So we were very successful with the Lebanese organized crime, the Italian organized crime. the Black American organized crime, we had developed significant informants. We had infiltrated significant crime groups and wiretaps. So at the end of, it was the end of the Lebanese case started out as a heroin case with the blacks selling the Italians. And then from the Italians, we jumped into the Lebanese, all the same group of people. So we did Marty McGuire, Julio, Louis Farrell, Al Cavuto, great agents, great partners, case makers, all of us. So by that time, we had wrapped up this big case. We had about 40 defendants. And now the routine is back then, 3, 4, 5 years in a group, and then it's time to do something else. You know your trade now. So Julio went to Puerto Rico. I was going to go to Puerto Rico with Julio on a lateral, but my wife at the time, we went there on a trip. I had done undercover work in Puerto Rico. Yeah, and so I loved Puerto Rico, cool place, but my wife did not, and so she says, I really don't want to go here. I said, okay, I understand. So I went out. So Cash goes, well, where do you want to go? I said, well, I live in Long Island, and again, he's asking me,
Yeah,
you know, where do you want to go? He took the place of Frank Turallo, great ASAC. Frank Turallo, he went to Miami, I believe, or headquarters. But great bosses. They really were, they understood us. We understood them. So Cash asked, where do I want to go? I believe as a reward, because the group now is starting to break up. And you take care of your workers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I said Long Island, but I still had a lot of people in court. So Julio was gone now. Marty was gone. Marty went to Germany. Al was still in the group. And after 4 months, I had not reported to Long Island. Because you know what? It was my home. New York City, Group 7, my desk. My life revolved around that, not my family, that. And it's hard to break away from that.
Yeah.
You know, so Cash came in and he goes, if you're not in Long Island by Monday, you're not going. So he got my attention. So that Monday I was in Long Island. Yeah. And the boss there was Dick Harborough, another great boss. And then that was a district office. So Dick had a beef with the SAC, Bruce Jensen, and he got downgraded to a 14. They made it a rack office. They disbanded the task force. And now I'm in Long Island, and I really made great friends with the guys in the Suffolk Police Department, Nassau, some I knew from childhood, State Police, you know. So, and I brought a pocket full of informants with me to Long Island.
Yeah.
And started making good cases, you know, and got running and gunning, powder on the table, people in jail. That's what we were taught.
I want to talk with you. You've mentioned this a couple times, Art, where you had really good supervisors. And I was very fortunate in my career to have much of my career with great supervisors. A lot of those guys were Vietnam vets and older people like that. Dante Soriano, who I interviewed, said you were one of the best supervisors he ever worked for. So a couple questions for you. Where do you think your leadership skills came from?
I really am a good listener, and I observe. And I can differentiate from a case maker to a guy who's a wonderful support agent. He's just not inclined to go undercover. you know, and not inclined to flipping people. But what he does it great. And I learned that, you know what? It takes a village. Hate to use that phrase, but everybody contributes to the case. And I learned that in DEA, and I learned that in New York City, you know, and everybody had something they were really good at. So I learned that young. I also learned that everyone needs a chance. I was given a chance. I had made mistakes. I wasn't crucified for my mistakes. No, I was taught a lesson. Going up the ladder, everybody makes a mistake. Everyone. And I learned an awful lot, you know, going to the Philippines. 3 years there now. I really didn't have too many people I could count on. My support was, for all intents and purposes, gone. It's in Southeast Asia. We're a very dangerous place. And the support, my partners, gone. I made partners on Long Island, the best. We're friends to this day. So I learned so many lessons. How to be a good supervisor, observing bad supervision. I don't even like using the word supervisor. I like the word leader. You know, so I always use the word, hey, Jack Toll was a good leader. Jack Taylor, good leader, good boss. Tarallo, good boss. You know,
How much of your leadership skills or your leadership ability do you think you can attribute to working for really good people?
significant, especially on the street. You know, the case agent, generally speaking, is calling the surveillance. You have guys like Jack Toll. He's not calling it, but he's sitting next to Marty McGuire, he's the 13th. Marty was his backup. So he really had a good foundation to observe how it works in the DEA.
Right.
And then, like Julio and I, we became good surveillance agents. It's our case. We're calling the shots. Got to argue with Marty a few times, but that's okay. We all understood each other. But you develop the attitude to go along with the successes.
Yeah.
And you make it work.
Yeah.
So I really had good leadership going up the ladder. And I observed some bad leadership. You know, and no names that,
Yeah.
everybody knows the players.
Yeah.
Especially in the DEA. Serious.
Yeah.
You know, and your reputation does follow you.
Yeah.
And I was always fortunate. I came out of the Philippines. I was promoted to a 14 in San Diego. I was given a real nice award. The promotion alone was a great reward. But because I made cases in the Philippines in spite of incredible obstacles.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So you get to the Philippines in 85.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what you're doing overseas in the Philippines.
Okay, the Philippines is a transshipment point for heroin, methamphetamine, marijuana. Methamphetamine is somewhat homegrown there. They called it then, I think, ice. But the Philippines is full of Yakuza, Japanese organized crime. The Filipinos, I would say, my father's two cousins, one cousin was a Bataan Death March warrant officer in the United States Army. Unbelievable human beings, survived it. Both brothers survived it. My dad was at the Leyte invasion. The Philippines are great intelligence agents. My God almighty, oh yeah. The Filipinos do their homework. I walked into the Philippines, and the Filipinos, they greeted me with open arms.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell me why. I just kind of knew. Because of my dad, my uncles, but then you called up, your second cousins, uncles. But the true people that kept me alive was the Naval Investigative Service. The NIS had an office, and they had a multitask job. They were counterintelligence agents. They were drug agents, criminal investigators. but one in particular, his name was Jack Mareschi. He was a few years younger than me. His boss was Steve Heinzel, and they recognized my value, my worth, because again, I can make a case. So those guys, they would back me up in the very hairy undercover work. And what was crazy about the Philippines is you're surrounded by corruption throughout the government, the legal system, the police, Federal Bureau of Investigation, which I worked with an awful lot. The Narcotic Command were special ops top guys comprised of the constabulary, the Marines, the Army, Filipino Army. So I worked with a 10-man group that I really worked with. That was led by a Captain Juancho Saban. And Juancho became a 2-star general. And we're friends to this day. 2-star general, very proud of him. He was actually thrown in jail because when the Philippines got their independence from their dictator, Marcos, he was one of the plotters, along with the future general the future president, General, oh my God, I'll think of it.
Okay.
But all that being said is, but there was corruption throughout. And so you really had to be careful because it was life and death. And you truly had to, the guys covering you, which were my NIS guys, they covered me, my team covered me, because I was meeting with crooked Filipino police constabulary in charge of a whole district in Manila. Crooked. Multi-kilo deals, hand to hand, meeting in hotel rooms. One particular colonel at an undercover meeting, and that was a 5-kilo deal, heroin. He literally, and the source of supply are Chinese drug dealers working with the Yakuza. He says to me at the table, we meet, and I just flew in. My undercover role was an Italian wise guy, organized crime member. I just flew in to establish a heroin connection in the Philippines. Common. So, in this one particular case, and I could tell the story, a very good story, but very dangerous. He opens up his carry bag, pulls out 1911 45, shows, and I didn't have the intel on him, didn't know he was this police colonel. I just knew he was a Filipino, who these guys were. He just showed up at the set for the first time. Pulls out a police ID, Colonel, Manila North. He goes, you know what happens to people who make mistakes in the Philippines? And I went, I can just guess. I start laughing. I see, and again, same thing happens in New York. And him and me hit it on. He never smiled. He never laughed. He just let me know he was going to kill me. Wow. And then from there, in that afternoon, and again, we call it running and gunning. We did that when the FBI, when they first came to New York, thinking they were taking over the DEA, because that was just about happening. And the first FBI agents, 2 guys, showed up at our squad. We all looking at each other like, all right, here we go. That afternoon, one was Mickey Mott, good agent, both good guys. They show up. By that afternoon, we do a, that was coke. We do a 3-kilo knockoff. I'm the undercover agent, and Louis Farrow is my money guy. I meet, oh my Lord, I met the bad guy. We left our meeting with the FBI. Now we shoot up to Yonkers. Our informant introduced me to a bad guy, an Italian guy, mob-like, no doubt in my mind. I meet with him. He's going to do 1 kilo. Okay. I leave him, join up with the group. We shoot back to Manhattan from the Yonkers. We put together a flash roll. And we're all doing this on the run. We don't even have people identified, but that's how it is, how it was back then. I'm sure it's still like that today somewhere in the world, because everybody says, the DEA doesn't operate like that anymore. I say that's nonsense. Sure, things have gotten so much more technical, absolutely. Restrictive, reporting, all the above.
Yeah. But
you still have great agents running and gunning, making dope cases. So we get back, people are identifying people. We left the bar. We go to the Italian. I was so convincing, the guy takes me to his house in the Yonkers. Takes out a bottle of my favorite. I don't think of these cases. Never talk about them. So, Chavez lays it out. Me and him knock out this bottle. He's checking me out. I'm checking him out. And I actually made a bad mistake. We're drinking. So we're talking to each other, and he goes like this. You know what? Artie, you look like a cop to me. I went, dude, you look like the cop. He whips out a New York City Silver Shield. He was a cop. He was a police officer. And the mistake I made, you're on the job? He missed it. I didn't. I went, what the fuck is going on here? I always carry my weapon. Now, I said, dude, where do we go from here? He goes, no, we're good. He tells me the story. He's into the Shylocks for gambling, and he's only doing this to pay off the bad guys for the debt. A true story.
Only in New York.
Now we all, because again, we're running and gunning.
Yeah.
Bar, his house, back to the office. I remember what the flash roll was, and it was more than 1 kilo, but long time ago. So, all right, guys, this is how it's going to go down. And nobody really stopped you from doing good work, because we did good work. I told you the team members. I mean, we really had it down. So the FBI's with us. Flash roll, the deal was going to take place in Flushing. The cop, bad guy, tells me where to meet him. Louis is driving the undercover Cadillac. Blue Cadillac, I remember. How do you remember that? And Julio's driving. I'm in the passenger. The New York City bad cop gets in with us. We're going to do the flash, talk and everything. Now we trip to pick up to see the flash roll. Show him the flash roll. Not giving it to him. Show him the flash roll. Okay. Because why? We're very believable. Louis Farrell, he was a New York City cop for 14 years. He came on DEA like 2 weeks before his 35th birthday, because back then it was 35.
Yeah.
Very convincing. I have so many Louis Farrell stories. Rest is all. He passed away last year. So, we go back to the car. It's just me and Louis. Got the Italian wise guy. I turn around. I got my gun out. It's pointed at his belly. I said, hey, Frankie, you were right. I am on the job. I says, you make a bad move, I'm going to kill you right now. He goes, oh, I'm good. He goes, I'm not armed. I said, put your hands up. Okay. Louis gets out, does a quick pat down. And again, once a cop, always a cop. I said, Frankie, you going to do the right thing? He goes, you just tell me what I need to do, Art, because now he's a good guy again.
Yeah.
So, make a long story bearable. He gives a complete diagram of the pad that he went to get the key. Yeah, we came back. He goes to get the key. Surveillance is on him. He comes back with the bag of dope. We take him off. Surveillance makes the apartment building. So we have locations. All right. We take. Yeah, running and gunning. So he tells us everything that's going on. The bad guy is an Italian hitman who's inside there. He's guarding the stash pad. There's money, there's dope. The bad guy has a girlfriend, and the bad guy sits at a window on a stool, and he has a .32 automatic with a silencer on it. And he details of what's happening. Okay, sounds good. We debrief him there. Now what are we going to do? We're going to hit the pad. Surveillance has been on it. The girlfriend, we know where we're going. It was on the 3rd floor. The girlfriend is leaving. We find out it was to get a cup of coffee. So we don't do anything. She left. She's walking. Surveillance is watching her. She comes back with a couple of cups of coffee. We scoop her up before she goes in, knock on the door, and he opens it, quickly runs, and we bust in the door. And I gave him a right, put him down, got his gun, secured it. No one else was there. Then we all go back to the New York office, Group 7, and the 2 FBI guys, Mickey, Art, this never would happen in our office. Like, they saw how we operate and how we run.
Yeah.
You know, you just can't waste time.
Yeah.
You know, so many dope dealers, so little time. Every agent's carrying multiple caseload. Okay, and always the goal is what? To bring it up. And we, most of the time, we brought it up to the big, beautiful conspiracies in the Middle East. You know, I mean, just Europe. So
or most people don't realize, you know, DEA in particular, but narcotics are into everything. And most people don't realize that DEA has a real fingerprint and can get into all this, you know, counterterrorism stuff that a lot of agencies, even CIA, doesn't have informants like DEA has. So can you tell me a little bit about your UC work on the Iranian heroin traffickers in Manila? Tell me about that case.
I got that informant from the NIS. And the informant was a military intelligence NCO. He was a sergeant. Filipino military intelligence, very corrupt. Very, very corrupt. In effect, as they were the enemy. Also, they protected the drug organization. So, I get the informant. The informant and I hit it off very well. And the goal is to meet the Iranian, and his name was Khosrow Miniature. Khosrow Miniature was the former Iranian labor attaché at the Iranian embassy pre-Khomeini, pre the 79 revolution. He remained a loyalist to the Shah of Iran. He was a former SABAC agent for the Shah of Iran. So he was selling heroin worldwide to support the anti-Khomeini regime that still exists to this day. Pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I developed a good relationship with Miniature, Khosrow. I started making small buys, and his cover was selling caviar, Iranian caviar, which was very expensive, and I happen to love caviar. Champagne, vodka and caviar. Oh my God. So our undercover meetings are going very well. I'm allegedly flying in to Manila. A couple of times we actually staged me coming in on a plane, because Wancho, they're my, and the NIS guys, they got me covered, so this is going on for a while, about 4, 5, 6 months. The cables are going out, investigations are starting up worldwide. And then ultimately we take them off. And that was a pretty interesting takedown. So the NIS, I'm also figuring they're the intelligence aspects of this, which they are.
Yeah.
And I'm completely fine with it. Again, America's interests come first. So Jack Mareschi had never done. So we have our operational meeting. The plan is 3 kilos of heroin. We're going to have a flash roll in a bag. Believe it or not, it was actually like $24,000, and that covered 5 kilos because heroin's so cheap, And I mean, again, when I'm discussing undercover operations, is that, I explain, how we do it back in New York. We'll make that 100%, bring it down to 5%, 10%, make a lot of money. And that's why I'm here. I'm building a route that everyone's going to get rich. I'm very conversant in the trade, and how I'm getting it back home is my business, not theirs. They understand that. Everything is compartmentalized. So 5 kilos, flash roll. I go to Jack. Jack has never done an undercover job. And I love this guy. We became very close friends. I said, Jack, you're going to go undercover with me. I said, relax, because there's a lot that's leading up to this final meeting and the deal.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the enemy. Castro Miniature lives in a somewhat nice residential area in not the suburbs of Manila, but in a nice house. And who protects him? The Philippine military intelligence. All dirty. So a lot of moving parts to this, a lot of things to be concerned about. But I tell Jack a couple of days before, I said, look, Jack, I trust you. I know you want to do all this, but this is a big case. You've been with me from the beginning. Guess what? The 2 undercovers, we're going to take this down together. Okay, okay. It's blood pressure. He turns head. So now it's after the meeting, we have a taxi cab, an undercover taxi cab. We have a taxi cab driver who's one of Saban's guys. I've got my, did I wear a weapon that then? No, I did not wear a weapon that day. Why? Because I knew where I was going, going into. I knew how dangerous it was, but it just wasn't appropriate to have a weapon, because if they want to pat me down, well, what I'm going to tell you is very, as we moving forward. So I did not walk in with a weapon. Jack had a 12-gauge shotgun because I told him that's what he was going to have. And he had a red towel, beach towel, in the back with him. We had the leather bag that was in the trunk just to do the flash. So when I get in there, Khosrow's brother-in-law was Aboud, married to Khosrow's sister. Aboud is there with an old World War II 9mm submachine gun. And I'm an Italian wise guy. Nobody's going to fuck with me. What the fuck is going on here? Are you out of your fucking mind? Khosrow, put that fucking gun right down. Put that gun down. Let me see that fucking gun. They hand me the gun. They take it out. I said, are you guys out of your mind? This isn't child's play. People die over this. Or don't be mad. No, I am fucking pissed off. And now what do? We're drinking Chivas and tea. That's how it is, you know. So, meanwhile, I'm worried because everybody's outside. I know military intelligence out there. Why? Because my informant's one of them. So now it's time. You never rush to do the deal. Your hand can't shake. So I says, okay, come on. Let's go out. No, you go get it. Fuck you. You're coming with me. I don't want your brother-in-law to shoot me in the back. You know, so Castro and I are walking out, having a conversation, best of friends. We've been together now multiple times. You know, we're talking about going out tonight, doing something, you know, whatever. So, you know, I give it the hit signal. So Jack gets out to open up the trunk. So he gets out the white red bath towel is on the end of the 12-gauge shotgun. He's so scared. He's walking to us, and Castro goes, why does that guy have a red flag? I went, I don't know. Let's go find out. And I'm laughing. I'm truly laughing. So we're getting closer to him, and then I just, boom, I put him down, drag him behind the taxi cab, Jack. I said, Jack, help me. Because Abbas is in there, and that machine gun is still in there.
Yeah.
And then my Filipinos, they surround the place, kick in the door. So that's how that case went down. All right? And guess what? I mean, we took down, you know, a former SAVAK agent, which was public knowledge.
Yeah.
And class 1 violator. So you asked an interesting question in the beginning. Here was the uniqueness of being an undercover agent in the Philippines. It's a 2-man office, the country attaché and the assistant country attaché. So my job is to be a diplomat, represent our agency. When congressional delegations came in town, it was our job, my job, to wine them, dine them, take them out, show them what drug trafficking is in the Philippines, making them understand, you know, how significant the Philippines office is to the overall drug effort, counter-drug effort. Actually, 2 days before I did the undercover takedown, I was addressing the Rotary Club of the Philippines. I'm giving a speech. And again, I have a long beard. I look like a bad guy, but I'm wearing a tie, suit. I'm giving a speech, you know, and there's people at the dais, all with, you know, Arthur Scalzo, Assistant Narcotic Attaché. Now, in 2 days, I'm going to be going undercover against a bad guy, a killer, bad human being. But that was the job.
Yeah.
You know, so you took, you know, and again, we had many networks of, listen, the job was to stay alive, do the most economical deal you can do, arrest, get that intelligence flowing, which can be reported worldwide.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Okay, so Art, in 85, you're in Manila. 88, you get promoted. You go to San Diego. You're in charge of the meth task force. I've interviewed other guys that were in there with you. Obviously, you guys were doing God's work. But in that same time frame, about 91, you start basically going to Snowcap.
88 to 91, I was in San Diego.
Yep.
At the end of my 3-year tour.
Yep.
Then I have to go to headquarters. For my headquarters, that was the game. You know,
right.
That was the way it was.
Yep.
3 years, your first line command. Then you go to headquarters, anywhere from 3 to 4 years, back out to the field.
Yeah.
So at the end of my 3 years, then I'm going, there's a conference at Morro Bay. Yes, a multi-divisional supervisors conference in Morro Bay. And Frank White Frank White gave a presentation
Wow.
about Snowcap.
Hmm.
Everyone knows Frank White's reputation.
Yep. Yep.
God rest his soul.
Yep.
He was a wonderful, great agent. Great agent. Great role model. And a character. So Frank is there, Steve Castile, and they do a video of Operation Snowcap. I knew what I wanted to do. You know, so Tommy Clifford was the ASAC, and Julius Barretto had replaced. Charlie Hill retired. Julius Barretto, another great leader, great SAC. Again, I was blessed.
Yeah.
Charlie Hill, Julius Barretto, great SACs. Understood good workers, understood a case, truly. So I told Tommy, because I was going to take over the Snowcap, the Green Ice group, and Tommy Clifford was the father of Operation Green Ice. Pete Tomano ran that during that 3-year period. Pete Tomano ran that operation. Well, he was the group supervisor. Bobby Precioso was he was the 13. Pete Tomano's the GS. Tommy Clifford is the genius behind that whole operation. And Tommy and I had a great relationship. He appreciated me. I appreciated him. So he actually dangled the carrot for me to stay in San Diego. Don't worry about going to headquarters and take over from Pete Tomano. And while it would have been great for my career, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do Snowcap.
Okay, so tell the audience. I've interviewed other people talked about Snowcap, but for the audience, explain what Snowcap is.
Snowcap, Congress had approved millions and millions of dollars and combined the resources of the CIA, the Department of Defense, the State Department, all the services, and Department of Justice. All of those cabinet level were combined to support. And again, we're not allowed to use the phrase paramilitary operation. Paramilitary operation quacks like a duck, eats like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. And it was definitely a law enforcement paramilitary operation that was well thought out by the earlier predecessors. And the original group of guys, I believe, went through the Panama Jungle School. And then I went in 91. I was accepted to it. You ought to compete for it. Like every special agent, every agent who volunteered had a shot at it, because you're going to leave your home, your family, for 3 months.
Yeah.
You're going to be gone for 3 months, back for 3 months. 1 year of training. 1 full year. So I volunteered. I was accepted as a 14. And then I had to go to Ranger School. So I went through they call it it's the washout week, Hell Week. So we started out with a great number of guys, and a lot of guys, believe it or not, failed in the swimming portion.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys. And, right now, I was one of the oldest guys. I was 39 years old. Bobby Castillo was a couple of years older than me. God rest Bobby's soul. Greg Kornloff. We were all 14, so they were older than me. Bobby was a Marine. Good guys. So I'm 39 years old. These guys are at least 1 year or 2 years older than me. We're going to be going through a modified Ranger School. The assessment week, we lost a lot of guys who would have been great. Young guys, all in shape, but some guys just could not swim, but fortunately I could. And, but I just remember that Hell Week. And Johnny Cohen, he had Army veteran, very young. He was Army National Guard. And not that makes any difference whatsoever. But I just remember the forced march with about 40 pounds on our back, after going through the obstacle course, they're hosing us down. And I just was like, oh, my Lord. So I go up to, now again, our squad, there were 8 or 9 of us. There were only 3 left in our squad. Me, Johnny, and it could have been Henry, me, and Hank. So I go up to Johnny. and call him Johnny Boy. I said, Johnny Boy, no matter what, you stay by my side. I will never quit. But if you see me faltering, if you see me go down, do not let me go down. Because I was worried. I mean, it was the last day of this 7-day hell week, and it was taking its toll. You know, and I'm like, okay, like I'm downing myself, you know, and he did not leave my side. You know, but we were allowed to have like sneak heroin, protein bars, you know, energy bars.
Yeah.
You know, and well, we were wet sneakers, a backpack, army green, and he never left my side. You know, we passed it perfectly, but he never left my side. And I'll never forget that to this day. Johnny Doe did about three tours with me. So I make it through all the training. I finish Ranger School. From Ranger School, I moved my family to Washington. I start a language school. That was, I think it was a 3-month. And then, I didn't know it was longer than that, but whatever it was, we did. It was the Army Department of Defense Language School. And then when I finished that, they had a team leader school back at Fort Benning where you, everything you learn at Ranger School, and you learn everything they taught us was great. We just didn't do the desert phase, which Ranger School had, but we did every other phase, and it was tough. But that being said, it really made us tougher, taught us a lot of good things, you know, that kept us alive, how to conduct operations, airborne operations, you know, rappel, mountain, pumping with the hog of 60, you know, it really, I actually enjoyed Ranger School. I thought, wow, this is pretty good stuff. And I was in shape.
Yeah.
By then I was really in good shape. So we graduated. So now it's time to deploy.
And so you spend time in Bolivia and Peru. What are your primary jobs down there? What are you doing?
I led a 10 to 15 person team, man team. I had Kelly Ray in my last tour. She was an agent from San Diego. And Kelly had come up to me every year. Art, can I get in your team? And I'm an honest person. I speak my mind. I said, Kelly, I don't want to have your death on my conscience. She goes, I'm capable. I said, there's no doubt about it. You're a PT queen. I just don't want to have your death on my conscience. And I didn't. The last time I took, she did. And she was by no means a liability. The opposite. She was more than a member of the team. She was a leader, you know, and she covered all of our team members on every operation. And that was the last tour was in Peru. The last 2 tours were in Peru. There was a real war going on in Peru. And Sendero Luminoso, Shining Path, corrupt army. You had a guerrilla group that was KPMG, something like that. We worked very close with the country office. Eddie Apodaca was the country attaché. Great leader, great boss. So we really had great intelligence coming at us from the skiff, actionable intelligence. And we, like I said, a paramilitary operation in every sense of the word, military operation, not para. I mean, we were doing assaults. We were working with the Peruvian Marines. You know, they used to clear by fire. I had to say to them, no, that's not allowed. No, Art, that's the way we do business. No, we don't clear by fire. You see the enemy with a weapon shooting. Absolutely shoot that enemy. But because it was a real war. And you know, there's some very interesting encounters that took place. Thank God I didn't lose a person, but we lost some of our counterparts.
Why, to me, I think Snowcap seemed to be very successful. Why do you think DEA did away with it?
Good question. There were many reasons. The rank and file of DEA, the leadership, not all were against it. The SACs mostly were against it for the GSs, the ASACs, for an understandable reason. They were losing their very young agents, because mostly were young agents that, you know, you had some old timers in it, But many, and guess what? They're losing a young agent, a year training, 3-month tour, every 3 months. So if I was a GS, but I was militaristic, I understood the concept, I bought into it, I studied it before I signed up for it, and I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So that was one reason. You had management, good leaders too, against it. Politically, Congress was for it because there was a lot of money, you know, running the operation was very expensive. And one of the tragedies of it is that the team that took my place was led by Frank Fernandez. We had 5 agents killed in action. I can tell you their names. Juan Va, Frank Wallace, they were the 2 pilots. Meredith Thompson. Sean's last name, I'll think of it, American Green Beret. So Frankie Fernandez was a young New York agent that I helped break in. And then he was transferred out to San Diego. And he was a snowcapper. He was the 13th, multiple tours, did a good job. I helped him get his 14 as a team leader. And Frankie had a couple of problems as a team leader, but shit happens. So based on one of the problems, he had to leave Bolivia. And when you come back, and you go back to headquarters for your 3 months back, you now take the desk for where you just left from. So I was on the Bolivian desk as part of Snowcap. So I felt obligated to mentor him his whole career, and I did up until the day he died. So when I was done with my tours, my mom became the head of my family while I deployed. My mom took care of my kids while I was deploying to Snowcap missions, operations. My mom just had a triple bypass, like a 3rd, 4th one. You know, I had to leave. I loved Snowcap. It really, I just knew the area. I developed, you know, good relationships. So I let Frankie know that. DEA said to me, "Who's going to take your place?" I said, "Frankie Fernandez." So Frankie Fernandez takes my place. And Frankie Fernandez died taking my place. I had Frankie's team over my house the night before they all shipped out. You know, and because every time before we shipped out, my mother would make a great dinner for my team and anybody, the cadre. You know, it was a party, saying goodbye. You know, we also had a good opportunity to go through the mission package that we just got from the intelligence people, yada, yada, yada. So, and I just want to pay respects to them. And the 5 of them, they died doing their duty.
Wow.
And they will be missed. So God bless them and their soul.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. Okay, so you're done with Snowcap. In 94, you get transferred. You're now the unit chief at the DEA Academy. Why did you go there?
A couple of reasons. I'm single parent. The academy was very close to my house, Aquia Harbor. I lived in Aquia Harbor. And I needed to be a better father. I had been gone, for all intents and purposes, for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to be closer to my kids, be a better dad. And I think I really never trained anyone other than my agents. You know, my agents, I was their trainer.
Yeah.
So the chief of operations, Doug Wankel, you know, I went into Doug. He understood my family situation, and he literally made it happen. Got on the phone in front of me, and I reported for duty to the academy. So the SAC, good agent. You're not going to film it'll come to my name. He had a nickname, Dave Westrate. So Dave Westrate is the SAC. And DEA had not hired a special agent in 2.5 years. There was a moratorium. So I was in charge of the police training, and for the DEA police training. You know, it's a mobile team. It's a training team, and great work. They train the cops countrywide, bring them to the academy, and I was very excited about it. And I think I was in my 3rd week of it, and I get a call to the SAC's office. So, Mr. Lestrade, Dave, Mr. Lestrade, Art, please sit down. I'm in trouble.
It's never a good one.
So he goes, listen, Art, I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Sure, boss. He goes, you know, we've been approved now to start hiring agents. I said, yeah, I heard that. That's fantastic. Yeah, he says, first class is going to start in 3 months. I said, wow. He goes, I want you to take over academic operations. I said, boss, I am honored, but I have to be honest with you. I am not the academic type. You know, I'm a practitioner, not a teacher. And he literally said, no, you're exactly what we want. So thank you, sir. Can't say no.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So now DEA is taken over by Tom Constantine. This is all in, you asked me earlier, what happened to DEA? Why did Snowcap end?
Yeah.
Well, Bryden takes over as chief of operations, and he was very anti-Snowcap. And it's the truth. You know, Bryden was a good man, but he just was very against Snowcap, very against it. We just lost 5 agents.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Shit happens. Price of doing business.
Yep.
Lost friends my entire career in the line of duty. You know, I believe in God. It was their time. That nevertheless, they ended. This is all the process now of ending it.
Yeah.
I think maybe 2, Frankie's team, and possibly definitely one other team deployed. But they ended it, which to me was not a service to their memory. You know, it's not a service to their memory. Why? We were doing good work. We were developing so much information. We took down Pablo Escobar's head of production in Peru, Vaticano. You know, and we took that. I was part of that operation, put it together, made it happen, deployed it.
Yeah.
We didn't lose anyone, but that's why Snowcap ended. So now, Constantine takes over, state trooper, superintendent of state police, had no real understanding of the DEA.
No.
He really forced the retirement of many of the older leadership that forced them to retire. No one's perfect, but DEA bosses knew the DEA at the highest levels.
Yeah.
So he brought in a lot of new guys, and a lot of those new guys never left headquarters, stayed there for the rest of their careers. I did have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But so now I have to, under Mr. Constantine. So he came out to headquarters and gave his pep talk, which was not really a pep talk. It was, this is what you're going to do. Hey, look, we have our own styles. So do I. You know, Iraq with my teams, new teams, I got my style.
Yeah.
And my style is not a gentleman. You know, hey, look, we're in a dangerous business. And this is what we do. This is how we do it. And you're going to do it my way. So Constantine gave his talk. And then he came up to me because he knew that I was in charge of academic operations. For all intents and purposes, I was the head of the basic agent school. Coordinate with the other GSs, but I'm in charge of the academics, getting them through. The other unit chiefs took care of, their, shooting, surveillance. So Constantine says to me, face to face, I'm telling you, pointed at me. I don't like being pointed at. Pointing his finger at me. I ran New York State Police's academy I'm going to expect you to run it like I did. And that attention, not parade rest. Said, excuse me, sir, I have a lot of experience. I will put this new curriculum together with all of the academic operations special agents, talking to him just like that. Very serious. We're all professionals. We're all loyal DEA agents. I will do my job and make you proud. Then he walked away. So I got 3 months now. All of the academic operation instructors are very used to academy lifestyle.
Yeah.
Not Artie Scalzo. But again, like I said, I don't like the word supervisor. I like the word leadership. I said to them, in all honesty, look, we're going to be working hard for the next 3 months. We're going to put it together. And really, some great agents did good work. It was not a 24/7, a lot of overtime, which we don't get. We put a lot of time into creating that. So after we did it, now we have a curriculum. And I even developed a book. I went to the State Police Academy. I wasn't ordered to go there. I just know my job. The new boss is the State Police. Yeah, I went in today. I said, listen, I think I should go to, he goes, good idea. And we replicated the New York State's book. And you know what? It was a great book. It identified for the first time DEA had on paper published a curriculum. So when we all retired, we never ever had anything we could take to subsequent careers to show what was the training we received.
Yeah.
You had to explain it.
Yeah.
So I was given the funding, the budget to make it happen. And Tina Murphy, Special Agent Tina Murphy, she led that. And she was pregnant at the time.
She was my class counselor.
Yeah. So Tina, I said, Tina, listen, it's a big project, but you've got the resources of the academy. I'm 100% behind you. I'm 100% behind everyone. But please, we need to do this. It's got to be ready in 3 months. She says, I got it, sir. So don't call me sir.
Here's a question I have for you, Art.
Sure.
So there's a distinct difference between the way DEA does things and the way FBI does things at the academy. Is there any thought process that goes in when you're in charge of academics or, firearms or whatever you are as a unit chief there? Is there any thought process in going, look, we have to differentiate ourselves between the way the FBI does things. This is what we do, and we have to do it this way. Is there any discussion about that?
Big time.
Wow. Okay.
Because by then now, we didn't have our own academy. We are co-located with the FBI.
Right.
And the SAC of the FBI, tall black gentleman, John, possibly SAC Sutton, but the SAC of the FBI, I would have to address the incoming class of the FBI, basic agents, and he would address our agents. And as part of my spiel, and I discussed this with the SAC, I said, excuse me, sir, there are some definite differences between the FBI and the DEA. He says, I know that, Art. And I went, and I said, if you notice our agents, we all are walking around tactically. We're wearing black field pants. We're wearing black pullover. We're wearing combat boots. We're actually running everywhere we go. In the morning, we wake up, we run, we do PT before the day starts. I run with the new classes. I went, so the day we graduate, this is the key point. I said, the day we graduate from basic agent school, we report to the field. That next day, especially in the inner cities, there's a very good chance we're going to be kicking in doors with the rest of the group because we have limited manpower. and your job is to kick in doors the day you graduate and report. Of course, there's oversight. You have a partner, you have a senior agent. He understood completely. He would incorporate into his opening to his special agents. There's big differences between us and the DEA. He would repeat what I said. So, and it's the truth.
I'm curious though, Art, what did you tell when you had to address the FBI? What were you telling those guys?
I told them the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, and not diminishing their
no,
not being condescending, not
Right.
diminishing them at all.
Right.
It's just that their program was different from ours. Okay, they had a big white collar crime responsibility, and their nurturing was much longer than ours. They think they had to do background investigations for a very long time, and before they really got into kicking doors, a lot of time had passed. Not with the DEA.
Yeah.
I mean, my first day as an agent in New York was on a moving surveillance and a wiretap in the Bronx against the mafia. Marty McGuire was the senior agent. He was the backup to Jack Tull. And these were badass mafiosos, famous ones. Wiretap. Julio's my partner. Ron Brogan. Funny stories. But that's how it was. And it was not like that in the FBI. But the FBI did have things about them that I did like. I liked the way that FBI supported their agents in their PCSs. Really went above and beyond, where DEA at times did not.
Yeah. No, I agree. Did you ever have any discussions did anybody from FBI management when you were at the academy ever come up to you and go, hey, why do you guys do it that way?
Sure, all the time.
Really?
All the time.
What was there? Was it a complaint? Not necessarily a complaint, but was it why are you guys so militaristic? What was the issue?
Because DEA is a paramilitary operation,
Sure.
in my estimation.
But were they saying, hey, why don't you guys do it more like us?
Well, the reason is ours is a different job than yours.
Right.
You do everything we do, but not as much as we do it at the volume.
Yeah.
Drug traffickers across the world are terrorists, narco-terrorists. Most terrorist operations, most revolutionaries are funded by what? Drug money.
Yeah.
And we've always looked at it that way. Where does the case take you? Takes you to Iraq, takes you to Afghanistan, it takes you to Thailand, Vietnam. That's how it is. Drug trafficking worldwide supports revolutions. Bin Laden, supported by opium production, heroin production. So it was, it was an honest statement to an honest answer to a young agent from the FBI who's asking.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Not ashamed of it.
No.
Quite the opposite. I love that job. DEA's best job I ever had.
Okay, so in 95, you go home. You're essentially, you become a GS-15, which is
14.
14?
I got a rack. I was laterally transferred from the academy. The rack office in Long Island became vacant.
Okay.
I'm a single parent.
Yep.
I have 3 kids.
Okay.
And Mr. Constantine gave me the position. He knew I was a New Yorker, obviously. And because I thought I was doing pretty good at the academy, but he also knew my record.
Yeah.
He saw I took the hits. I've been all over the world, as most of us.
Yeah.
I mean, we do our job.
Yeah.
And he understood. And he gave me the rack job, but he gave it to me with a caveat. He goes, when you go home, I want you to do a favor for me. And this was, as the chief of academics, you get to at the end of the graduating. You remember this, when you're giving your badge and your credentials, it's the chief of academic operations. Mine was Mr. Mulherrick. I was head of, and I really enjoyed the 4 or 5 classes calling out the name of the new agent. They're all sitting in front. Special Agent Jones. Mr. Mulharick had a very deep voice. You know, I would use my deep. But it was an honor. I was proud.
Yeah.
You know, thank you, sir. Congratulations. Proud moment, right? You remember when you got yours?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who gave you yours?
I don't know if it was Westrate or not. I don't know if he was there.
It would have been the agent that had taken my place. What class were you?
88.
Okay, so you got it before I got there. I got there 91. You graduated 3 years earlier.
Yeah, I remember running into you after I'd come back for firearm school and tactical school and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah.
So anyway, what did Constantine ask you?
So he said to me, he goes, "You're going to take over the Long Island office." Yes, sir. He says, "I know your background there. I want you to go to Senator Al D'Amato, his office, introduce yourself, and I want you to go to the congressman." And the congressman, I don't remember his name. He actually changed parties. But I did that. I went to Congressman Senator D'Amato's office. I went to Congressman. It'll pop in my head. But I introduced myself, my background, you know, and similar to what we're doing right now. Ask me, sir, any questions you might have. They hardly had. Do a good job. Yes, sir, I will. No, because again, I mean, they don't ask you political questions. They don't ask you what your party. No, that's not allowed.
Right.
And they can't apply political pressure on your decisions as a DEA boss, executive.
Yeah. So you get the rack job. So that's a 14 then?
14, yes.
When do you get your 15? Do you get your 15 when you go to headquarters?
No, I got my 15 about 2 years later. So when did I get back there? I got there in 95, 96, 97. 97, I got promoted to a 15. I had built up, again, I walked into a great place, a great operation. My predecessors did a great job. The office was a great running operation. I just wanted to make it a little better.
Yeah.
And things that I saw. So I created a AFSET forfeiture group, and I did the politicking to make it happen. I didn't ask DEA for permission, but I was very friendly with police departments based on my growing up and my background, having been assigned in Long Island at the office 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
So I formed a asset forfeiture group. Every case that we made was scrutinized separate and apart from the normal investigation for assets. Something that was always happening anyway. I just formalized it.
Yeah.
And which was very successful. And then I created the marijuana task force. We had arrested very high-level marijuana traffickers. I had a couple of really good Nassau detectives, Eddie and Patty Dowling. And they were operating at the highest levels, but marijuana was not a high priority operation.
Right.
So I created this task force, didn't ask for permission. In fact, I was told no by my ASAC.
You never ask for permission. You always beg
Ask for forgiveness. So I created the marijuana task force. I got the U.S. Attorney's Office on board. The U.S. Attorney had Loretta Lynch. Her and I we became true colleagues, and she assigned a very capable AUSA to head up that, and Ryan Bird. And yeah, we were very successful. And then management in New York City, I'm briefing New York and what we're doing. They knew what I was doing. They knew the successes the office was having. So the paperwork was drawn up to make it a district office. And I was fortunate enough to get the 15 to go along with that.
Why do you, later on in 2000, you go to headquarters, and we talked off camera before we started recording this, that you had an opportunity to get your SES, but essentially you picked your family above that. What were you doing before we start talking about what you did after DEA? What were you doing as the executive assistant to the deputy administrator?
So I went through a tough time out in Long Island my last year. And I had a heart condition. And also a particular, the marijuana investigation case. I was given the acting job as the acting associate SAC, which I didn't want. But that being said, I went through a tough time, and I was relieved of my command in Long Island. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So I come home from sick leave, and then Julio Mercado, my partner, Janet Reno, Miss Reno knew Julio and also I. And Julio was the SAC of, I believe, Houston. And great agent. Julio called me up, and I was actually driving with my wife for my older boy's graduation from Army Intelligence School out in Huachuca, Arizona. Hey, I'm going to be the deputy administrator. Brought tears to my eyes. And he goes, pack your bags. I went, Julio. I said, listen, I'm going to get a job at the DA's office. You know, I'm going to retire in 2 years. He goes, I need you. Say no more. You know, my wife was right next to me. And so I went out as for 2 years out as his executive assistant, you know, chief of staff to the office of the deputy administrator. And I covered his back and the agency that I love, and just tried to do the best job I could.
Yeah.
So you asked the question also. They had created the SES board.
Yeah.
And I was interviewed, and I was very high up there. I believe I was #1 on the SES board, but I knew I was going to retire because I had a stable life now.
Yeah.
My wife retired as a detective sergeant. She was a detective by then, and she and my mom took care of our kids because we had a child together in 2003. But during that time, just had the 3 kids, you know, and again, the anchor was out, and I was doing my job as a dad, which I always tried to do, but the work got in the way of being. That's the nature of our business.
Yeah.
So I went back home and then retired in January. So, and then I became a detective.
Yeah. So you become a detective. This is fascinating to me. So in 2002, you become a detective for the Suffolk County DA, and you're not a supervisor. You're just a detective. So I know from my position, when I retired from DEA, I was hiring people, and I would call DEA guys and say, hey, do you want to do this? And I remember distinctly calling ASACs, former ASACs, and some of them would get very, I don't know, not belligerent, but like indignant. Well,
Good word.
Why are you hiring? Why are you hiring me when I was an ASAC? And it's like, look, either you want the job or not. So the question I have for you is, how do you put your ego aside to go, hey, I've been a 15. I probably would have been a SAC. How do you go from a 15 running whatever you're running, a whole bunch of people, to just basically back to a line agent? How do you put your ego aside that way?
I love making cases, and I love blocking up bad guys. Simply stated, as simple as that. Yeah. I knew the job I was walking into. I knew I thought I had an opportunity to come back into the DEA task force as a line detective. I really tried to make that happen,
but you know what? I find it really interesting, Art. So Bill Bodner, I did an interview with him. He was the SAC of LA, and he said the exact same thing. Why do you think guys like you it's about the case, it's about people putting people in jail, where other people get into certain positions and go, kind of, it's like about me, and I want you to respect me, as opposed to maybe they didn't really ever like doing the job. Where do you think the difference is? Why do you think you had that?
No, number one, I don't like the job. I love the job. Always have.
Yeah.
You know, I love being a soldier. Always have. And doing the Lord's work, as we say, was to me so solemn. I was willing to give it up for anyone, any partner, any human being for that matter. Why? Because of the oath we have taken, the badge we have, you know, doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah.
And to me, it's solemn. I'm not being a Boy Scout, although I was a Boy Scout. It's just my true belief. You ask me a question, I give you an answer. I miss it every day, and I would do it tomorrow if asked to do it again.
Yeah.
And it was pretty cool. Also, when your initial idea is to be a cop back home, when you leave active duty, and then all those years later, now you're a New York detective. How cool is that? And not only do you have the badge, you get to do the job again. And I did that for 10 years, very successfully.
Yeah. So what did you do? What did you do?
So every district attorney's office, basically in the United States for the most part, but especially in New York, has its own police department of detectives. Normally, they're retired investigators from the feds, from the local departments, from their local police department that in the community that district attorney serves. So the DA's office has had that, and I had to take a civil service test, passed it high enough to get hired off the list, and I knew I was going to be a detective. So when I started, they put me in white-collar crime. Okay, and now I'm Detective Scalzo doing white-collar crime, but I'm still me. And whether it's federal law or state law, I still know how to make a case. So my supervisor there used to try and inhibit my investigative prowess. And of course, I wouldn't let that happen because I did have the right to make summary arrests anytime I wanted to. Felony in my presence, making an arrest. Now, again, did I have a lot of juice behind me? Hell yeah. I'm going back to the place which I was friends with the DAs, the police departments. I was the head of DEA Long Island.
Yeah.
You know, not too many people are really going to say no to me, especially when what I present is a founded case based on good police practices, knowing the goal is to prosecute. So I knew all the mechanics after so many years. I bet young.
Yeah.
I had been a cop 30 years by then. You know, so I better know what I'm doing, and they hired me for that. And then I was assigned then to the Insurance Crime Bureau because that was very proactive. Remember I mentioned earlier Pete Smith, we went to high school together?
Yeah.
Well, he was a Nassau County motor cop, highway cop, and then he was really hurt, very badly injured in the line of duty, went out on 3/4, went to law school, graduated, became a successful attorney, then went to the Suffolk County DA's office as an ADA. Because he was so good, the district attorney put him in charge of the Insurance Crime Bureau. And he stopped me from going back to DEA. He comes up to me in the hallway. Hey, God, good buddies. We go back to childhood.
Yeah.
You know, man hug, that kind of friend. We're actually having dinner with him next week, him and his wife. So he goes, listen, you know, I'm in charge of it. It wasn't a bureau then. It was just a unit. He goes, I'm in charge of this unit. And we do insurance crime, and I know you do things proactively. Yeah. He goes, I know you know how to make a summary arrest. Yeah. What do you want? I knew where it was going. He goes, I want you to come in and you'll be in charge of the detectives, though. I said, Peter, thank you, but no thanks. I was a boss for so many years. I just want to be a line detective because he said I would be in charge. And then he goes, you know, sometimes we don't have a choice. And I knew that the deal was cut. I got my orders 2 days later, just like in DEA, you get official.
Yeah.
So, but believe it or not, it was pretty good. Why? Because it was very proactive. And then Peter was a very aggressive prosecutor. He went into partnership. Not make this brief. Went into partnership with the insurance industry. And I then did act as sort of a boss because everybody there knew who I was. Everybody there knew where I came from. And I was pretty respected as a line guy also.
Yeah.
So we started making cases. His only downfall was he indicted 500 people. Not joking. How do you indict 500 people? So after a year and a half of us working together very successfully, you know, he indicts 500 people. And they're still, like, again, because of the proactive nature of, like, I ran undercover garages. undercover body shops. I owned undercover body shops as an undercover detective. And my partner is, guess what? A retired undercover New York City detective. And we're kicking ass and taking names. It was a good place to work. You know, plenty of funds available. I knew the funds game on how to get funds, operations funded. You know, so I was writing up good paperwork to get operations funded. So Peter, it came to a head with Peter and the district attorney because, again, Peter was a genius. But they were now blocking his productiveness. And when you block something by design, that's hard to live with. And I definitely was against it. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? So he ultimately resigned. And DA calls me into the office. Listen, I said, well, boss, the reason why he's resigning is because of what's happening. I mean, again, honesty, but diplomatic honesty, you know, to a pro.
Yeah.
So he basically said, all right, go get him. All right. I went and got him, brought him back. We sat down, and ultimately he couldn't accept what the DA was saying. And he said, sir, I really appreciate, and he never turned on him. He's that much of a professional. So now I get us moved into an undercover location, getting funds. And because I understood local politics now very well.
Yeah.
And there's problems with local politics. So I got the whole unit out and to an undercover location where we are now designated a bureau. And the new bureau chief is a former AUSA that had worked for my office as an ADA prosecuting my office's cases. And at first, me and him didn't like each other at all. But I explained myself to him. In fact, I went up to him. I said, look, Lenny, you and me don't understand. We really don't like each other. I said, so if you don't want me here running the detectives, he goes, no, I do, as long as you can live with me. I said, I can live with anyone, but I have a way of doing things, and it's very proactive. The attorneys all respect me. He goes, no, we're okay. We became a team, him and I. So I moved us, true team. We moved into a undercover location, and then for the next, my God, 8 years, 7, 8 years, just did really good undercover work, working with the bureau, working with the feds, setting up great producing undercover operations because the office allowed me to operate proactively. You know, you don't have to have, like most of, district attorneys, they want everything before they'll indict. They don't like the summary arrests.
Right.
And that's how it is.
Yeah.
We understand that.
Yeah.
You know, we actually have a AUSA assigned to us when we open up a case.
Yeah.
Which is good, but when you make a summary arrest for a reason, and you can lay out the reasons, so that's how we operated. And ultimately, I was allowed to go undercover again.
Yeah, it's like 20 years later, after you've retired from DEA, you're still doing undercover.
So I had locked up 2 foreigners who owned a check cashing place, very ethnic guys. And again, my experience level, especially with the reverse undercover operations and asset forfeiture and being able to fund up, I mean, again, pretty good at it. RICO's on my thing.
Yeah.
So I was allowed to operate that way. Lenny understood it, former prosecutor. We were now doing state RICO investigations, which most district attorneys do not want to go because the bar is so high for prosecutorial cases to prosecute. But he was like, he trusted me and I trusted him.
Yeah.
And I said, look, this is truly worthy. So I'm back undercover now. I'm laundering Russian organized crimes money through the check cashing places that I basically own because part of their plea agreements were to let me now run their places. So Artie, the wise guy, laundering money for the Russians, did that was about 3 years of doing that undercover work. So now it really reaches the level because we're operating now in Florida, and I'm literally going to Florida without letting anyone know, legally though.
Yeah.
We're just doing surveillance, is not going to make any arrests.
Right.
Just like who you trust, this is what's going on. We're just doing surveillances. Then talk to the police hey, listen, ultimately, again, I'm the CO of the unit. So look, this is what's going on. This is my intention to take it to the feds. But I do believe that the state prosecutor would because they'll be well-done cases. Guess who the U.S. Attorney, guess who the Attorney General of the United States is? Bundy. She was involved in that. So I wrap up the case in a ribbon. I call up my contacts at the Long Island RO, FBI, Rack's a friend. And I said, look, we have done this the Fed way, laundering millions of dollars, and places, actually, the Russians own a Medicare, Medicaid clinic in Hialeah, Florida, that is all bogus. It's all fraud. They're selling it to me, the wise guy. Good case. And okay, great case. All right. Thank you for the accolades. Now, let's make the case, guys. So they let me know that they'd given everything to their Miami division. And now about 2 months have gone by. Not a single call. Not a Fed anymore. So now I go to the DA, listen, we need to bring in the state prosecutor, Florida state prosecutor, and we have the police department we can work with. I know we can do it. You do, sir. He goes, run with it. Okay. Because I've already.
Yep.
So that investigation continued up until December of 2006, when we started operations. My partner in the district attorney's office was an active duty Suffolk County Police partner. Well, he became now I'm his boss, but I'm still his partner, and I'm calling the shots along with Lenny. I said, look, you're going to go undercover as my cousin Vinny from the movies. And before we get to the ending, we're going, Susie Padron, Detective Susie Padron from the Hialeah Police Department. That was my cousin Vinny's gumata. You know what a gumata is?
Yep.
In Italian. So we recruit from the police department. So as part of me buying it, me, the wise guy, introduces the undercover detective as my cousin Vinny's gumata, who has to be learned in this business. And this is all truly like meetings at very expensive restaurants. I'm using trafficker furnished funds. Again, a great undercover, another great informant. We're using funds that the Russian mobsters had given him because he was a doctor, thousands and thousands. Well, I'm using that money as down payments for the clinic. So we're literally buying this place and now building the case as we're buying it. And that led to the day that I actually bought the business legally through attorneys, dirty attorneys, accountants, dirty accountants, actual checks from the business with a bag full of money. So at my undercover location, there was a civilian building with real attorney offices in there. Okay, and I had an undercover business in there. Nobody knew what we were doing. So we actually talked to one of the attorneys. Say, listen, any chance we can use your attorney? Told him what's going on. He goes, yeah, you can. Because it was cool stuff.
Yeah.
So we got the room wired up. It's my office. I got a list, a mental list turned to a paper of 30 things you need to do before you take down a big case that day. And you know the drill. Statewide, multiple states, we're taking down over 30 people. The second we take them down, everything's over. So I wrote everything out, 30 things to do. Got to the office first thing in the morning. I had $1 million in a bag. Tommy, my cousin Vinny, he's my bag man. We go to my check cashing place, bring out the money from the beginning. We started, okay, the clock now is starting. All right, showed up there, got there before the place opened up, there, left it. did I meet the Russians ahead of time? No. No, Tommy picks up the Russians. So now I go to my office where my lawyer is going to do it, another detective, and Tommy picks up the Russians that I've been dealing with and meeting now for a couple of years, bring them in a lawyer office. I send Tommy back out to the car. Tommy's now with me with them for the first time, my cousin Vinny. Now he's an Irish guy. You don't look like an Italian Irish guy, but guess what? My leather jacket, my glasses, because we've been together for years.
Yeah.
But he was a good undercover. He was a real good, spy bus guy, real good, and good conspiracy guy. So the meeting's there. We're all happy. Money's going to take place. I have the checks to, trappings of legitimacy. We take it down right there where I went like this. And this one's on tape. Most of my meetings were, some were not. This is on tape. I went, hey guys. And my wise guy voice now is Detective Scalzo. I stand up and I said, you talking to Detective Art Scalzo with the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, and you were under arrest. And I go like this. Now you can shut the tapes. Now I'm on. Tommy's on. Literally, there's 20 detectives 2 doors down. They're all watching this like it's in the movies. So the way I conduct interrogations, every case is different. No camera, which eventually was turned on, but just letting them know the fact they would just, like literally, I thought one of them would have a heart attack. So that's how he took it. And then I leave that. End the story. I leave that, literally. I go back where all the detectives are, where our offices, where the prosecutors are. I said, okay, I'm heading over to the grand jury. I said, any questions? Everybody knows what they need to do. You're right, we got it covered. I said, all good. Lenny was still there. He's watching everything. In fact, he turned the cameras back on. So the DA's office is about 2 miles from there. I literally walk into the grand jury and someone's phone, yours, mine?
Oh, it's yours.
It's my son. He's talking. So the grand jury's there waiting for the first time. Lenny, I'm wearing now I put my suit on. I go to the grand jury. Nothing has been introduced to the grand jury. We kept it completely secret. So now he goes through the whole case. They're hearing this for the first time, spellbound. And in his introduction to me, Art, please tell the grand jury your background. So I briefly went through it. And then at the end, when he's closing my portion of it, he goes, I left one thing out. Detective Scalzo, commanding officer, he's going to Iraq in 8 weeks. He's volunteered for over a year's duty. He's going to be embedded with the United States Army, either in Iraq, because I didn't know he was going to Iraq yet, or Afghanistan. He's going to be in uniform as a combat investigator, combatant. And he goes, and this is, the nation was gearing up for the surge that was going. He's going to be in harm's way. They got up and just started to applaud.
Wow.
I mean, it was something. It was very emotional, and please be kind. I said, I appreciate that. I was getting a little emotional just by their thanks, you know. And then I got up, and then I went to war.
How does that happen, Art? Were you an Army reservist the whole time?
No. I left.
Okay, so how do you end up in Iraq doing that?
Well, again, my background, I was in the Army.
Yeah.
I was active duty.
Yeah.
And then I was in the reserves. And then I was in Snowcap.
Okay.
I mean, I went through Army Ranger School. Wasn't a Ranger, but I was trained by the best, America's best.
But do you volunteer for that, or does somebody reach out to you?
No, I volunteered for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends, And I had some friends very close, they're no longer alive, that I spoke to. I said, I tried to enlist after 9/11, which wasn't that far earlier. My son had now already been back from Iraq. So I tried to enlist, but I was too old. And I had friends at the Pentagon that I was able to talk to, and I didn't want a desk job. I did not want a desk job. I was in pretty good shape. They went, you realize, because it was a special program, it's called the LEPs, Law Enforcement Professionals.
Yeah.
And of course, they drew their talent greatly from the retired DEA. Many of us, if not all of us, were prior military. And all of us were dedicated, loved our job as DEA agents.
What were you doing? What were you doing over there?
I was in uniform. I actually joined my infantry 4th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red 1. I joined my brigade in Fort Riley. In uniform, I had to go to Texas first for training. I had to go to Virginia first for training. I got my weapons. I did my qualifications in uniform. I never deployed brigade strength ever. It was like, wow, this is so... And I'm an old man. I'm 54 years old.
Yeah.
In full battle rattle. They were laughing, call me grandpa. When I got on the bus at the airport at Fort Riley, I fell over. Well, again, brigade strength. So what I was expected to do was, once I arrived in theater, we first went to Kuwait. We were there for a little over 2 weeks. For the they call it indoctrination to the desert, and you're going through all the drills, more training, PT, on what to do if your Humvee's hit by a IED, EFP. So a lot of stuff to learn quickly, get back into the game. I'd been out of uniform a long time. And then once we went through all that, then we went to the brigade strength. We flew into BIOP in C-130s. You know, when you're flying into a war zone, which Baghdad was more than an active war zone, a C-130 calling in. We used to do it Snowcap, say, flying into Bolivia, Chimore, the base camps. You go into a steep dive, and then, it's weightlessness takes over. So we're here. Then we get off of the C-130s, then we stage, and then the Chinooks come out about 6 hours later, brigade strength. Now we enter the Chinooks under combat conditions. Out of respect, they were doing this out of respect to me and my partner. Listen, if we go down, we want you to be your perimeter protection. Literally, young soldiers weighed less than 100 pounds. It was like something to see.
Yeah.
Young, tiny, young soldiers, male, females, backpacks heavier than they are. And she said, I'm privileged enough for them to ask me to protect them. They were doing that for a reason. And it worked. You know, it just, hey, this is the real deal. This isn't playing games. We're in the war.
Yeah.
So thank God we didn't go down. However, the Chinooks, all of a sudden, the what do they call it?
Anti-aircraft?
Anti-aircraft devices, puts out flares. Goes out. It's something to see. I've seen that in the movies. Never saw it. Now I'm thinking, holy shit, RPG's on our track. Just preparing. I mean, you're prepared, don't you? You're not scared. You're trained. You're prepared. You know what to do if the shit goes bad, and if you don't survive, it's your time. Simply stated. We didn't go down, but we landed brigade strength at Falcon while it's under fire from the enemy surrounding the base camp in Baghdad. Under fire, mortars, and combat displacement. Land, pile out, that goes down. They take off. I was like, excuse the expression, what the fuck have I got myself into? But, again, we had been doing that for years. They were good at it. Not the first guys that went in.
But what are you doing back there, Art? Are you doing patrol? Are you doing investigative stuff?
Actually, all the above.
Wow.
Okay. So now there's a indoctrination process. Why am I there? Great question. Okay, so I'm there to assist in identifying the IFPs, instructed force projectiles, the IEDs, the EFPs, explosive form penetrator. Those things, we gave that technology to the Iranians. They perfected it, which is over 94% of our casualties were from snipers, IEDs, and EFPs. And an organizationally, Baghdad was one, Iraq was one big, but Baghdad's the center of the universe, one big bad guy terrorist structure. You have network, money, mullahs running the show. And it's set up as in our table of organization. So we were expected to hit the ground running. Don't be gun shy. We immediately attached myself to 2 battalions. And again, what am I? All right. You got to go out on patrol before you can know. So at first I started going out on patrol every day. And this is when we're just introduced to the battlefield, because who we're replacing, they're turning over their stuff to us. Like the very first day, we took significant rounds. We're stopping at checkpoints throughout Baghdad, and we're getting hit, and we're running with 5. But it's a cavalry unit, and they have been there, so they know what to do, you know, and they know how to get there. So, I mean, we took a rounds, and I'm just taking it all in, you know, just understanding the enemy and taking it all in, going out every day, watching seeing some horrific things take place. But once it took about 2-3 weeks for the turnover. So now is when, all right, out all the time, a lot of intelligence coming in, making sure that we can extrapolate from evidence, AKs with the fingerprints of bad guys, bombs, mortars converted into a EFE, mortars converted into an IED, seeing what EFPs do, learning the trajectory. Okay, we really didn't have that. We're learning it now. Gathering evidence, interrogating people we just rolled up. Cops are not, soldiers are not cops. We are cops. That's why we're there. I know when I was a soldier, yeah, I'm thinking about becoming a cop. Guys who know, and I developed a speech for all incoming soldiers, because when I first got there, now I'm just all the knowledge, all the material, I put it down really quick. I have a good understanding of what's going on, not been on the battlefield yet. So again, I had not seen their battle yet. I've seen other battles. By the 3 months, now I'm watching young kids killed in action, watching them, not being told about it. It's horrific. As dangerous as you can imagine. Also, when they take prisoners, they don't take prisoners. You don't survive. They torture you before they bury you. That's how Baghdad was in early, well, all of 6 leading up to 7. 5, 6, they learned their lessons. Oh, yeah? This is what we're going to do to you, Joe. Psychological war, psyops. So I'm now giving a speech, not a speech. And I'm dirty all the time. I'm nasty. I'm very blunt. Foul language is part of the vernacular. Generals fucking curse in the person now. So I would go up, you know, a battalion, 2 battalions, a lot of people, brigades, a lot of people. And I'm getting their attention, to include somebody falling asleep, picking up an eraser, throwing, I mean, just screaming to get their attention. And generally speaking, at the end of my spiel, and I went, I will never be taken prisoner. Never. Why? I'm not going to waste a good bullet on not killing the enemy. No, I'm killing them with a good. I'm not wasting a bullet on killing the enemy with a good bullet. No. I'm going to kill that, and I'm taking my own life with my dagger that I always keep right here, and I was wearing. If I wear my battle rattle, and he's, you know, and I said, go just like that, I'm dead. Now, I expected pushback from the military when I really had my thing together and I could see the effect it was having on the Joes in the field. Now it's like I wish there were 5 of me, because now they're understanding what we, the LEPs, brought to the battlefield.
Yeah.
And that became doctrine as the war went forward for so many years. And infantry in the Marines and in Army infantry, it came doctrine. You have a LEP in there. So, yeah. So, it's what I did in DEA, but just taking it to the battle. And with the risks of being killed far greater, but the risks were always high in the DEA. It's what we do, what we are. You know, and it's a privilege. So,
Okay, a couple last questions I always ask, Art. How did law enforcement affect your family?
brother, that's a tough one. It affected my first wife terribly. I didn't realize how much it had affected her. I understand why she left me, not the kids. But that being said, she was emotionally, mentally damaged from being married to me when she decided to leave us. I understand. Literally in New York, bad guys came to my house to kill me. In the Philippines, I had to move my family out of our home in Green Hills, across from, I always worked at the Philippine military bases. I had an office and a desk. They literally tried to kill me. I had to move my family out of my house to Subic, and then once to Clark. That takes a toll, and I understood it. You know, I was hurt, but I understood it. And ultimately, when I met my wife, Patty, I was never getting married again. I told the district attorney when he interviewed me for the job, he says, "Are you sure you want this job?" He goes, you know, he knew my resume. He goes, "You sure you want to do this? You're not going to have the adventure you had with the DEA or the military." I went, "No, those days are done." So ultimately, sending my son off to war, I understood what I put my family through, my mom, my first wife. And then I didn't tell my wife that I was volunteering to go back in the Army. But ultimately, after a lifetime of work, I was allowed to volunteer as a civilian, but serving as a soldier. So I didn't think I was going to make it. I had to go through physicals. I had a heart condition. I had to get a waiver from my cardiologist. I had to get a letter saying, "No, this guy's fit for combat." I still had that letter because years had passed. I healed. I was fine. Passed PT test, medical, surgeon. So where I'm getting to this is that when I finally told my wife, who is somewhat stoic, very tough, very Irish, does not show on me, I'm very Italian. When I told her, "Sweetheart, we have to talk," she cracked. She goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm going to war." She goes, "I don't understand what you're saying." I said, "Let me explain." She allowed me to explain. It wasn't easy. She goes, "Well, when are you leaving?" I said, "I'm leaving in 3 weeks." She goes, "You have a brand new son." Our little boy was 3 years old. When I left, he had turned 4. When I came back, he turned 5. He was already 5. She says, "You're leaving your 3-year-old son, and you're just telling me now?" And I'm giving you, like, look, I don't understand me telling you, but it's my story and it's my family. And you ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer.
Yeah.
She goes, "You put me in a very uncomfortable position. I know you. I know how you are. You expect me to say no?" Just like that. She goes, You have figured this out, haven't you? She was right. I knew she wouldn't say no, but I knew I was hurting her.
Do you think, you've mentioned your kids a couple times. Do you think if I chatted with them, if I asked them, you know, toward the end, you say, look, I knew what was going on. I tried to be a good dad. Do you think that they recognize that? Or do you think that they, you know, maybe have a little bit of issues with you being gone all the time?
Both. I know for a fact they all recognize what I did because I am their hero. My oldest girl, she's turning 50. My youngest girl, she's an RN at Johns Hopkins. My oldest girl, an executive with the VA. She's turning 40. My oldest boy took after me, went in the Army 12 years, 2 tours in Iraq, just retired as an esteemed, dedicated detective. And guess what? Working with DEA for the last 3 years of his career. No, they understand. But they also understand the damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, how could they not?
Yeah.
But they understand, and you know, they love me. They don't hate me. They love me.
Yeah.
No doubt. And I love them, you know, more than I love life.
Can you look back from when you started your law enforcement career to now? Did being in law enforcement affect the way that you see people?
Sure. Absolutely. Everyone's a suspect.
Yeah.
Living in a neighborhood. Look, we live in an affluent neighborhood surrounded by very rich people. 99% have never served.
Yeah.
Many sons and daughters of soldiers and sailors and Marines, Air Force. So I clearly see the difference between Patty and I and them. But to goodness of them, like our neighborhood, our one block, they know we're protecting them.
Mm-hmm.
They tell me all the time, joking around and serious. Something bad goes, Art, we know who we can turn to. If they have a situation in their life which could be a bit confusing, they come to me and Patty. She never served in the military, but she spent 20 years as a great detective. And she's married to a soldier. She's the sister of a soldier. She's the stepmother of a soldier. And my youngest son is an Army cadet, 4-year ROT scholarship. It's getting commissioned this December. So she's the mother of a soldier. She gets it, you know? So people come to us, you know, and that's okay. That's what we're for. But we're definitely different from everybody.
Do you have any regrets about your career or things that you would do different, law enforcement wise? I mean, like, so, for example, some people ask me, hey, would you do something different with the TSP or investing or going overseas? Do you have any things that you might do different?
I mean, no. I loved my career. I served my country. I was successful in my job. I was loyal to the badge, the flag, my partners, the men and women that worked for me, men and women I worked for. I was always loyal, and I'm loyal to this day. So, no. Sure, things happen along the way. Makes me scratch my head. You know, like, damn. And I made mistakes. A lot of mistakes along the way. That's part of all of our education.
Yeah.
You know, but my loyalty to all that I just pronounced, that's rock solid. If you do my eulogy, you've got the information on tape. I'm serious. You know, I appreciate you interviewing me. I really never gave one my entire career. First time I did an interview was for BBC last year, and I was skeptical to do it. I did it. Came out pretty well. They were very professional. Why? We all have enemies out there.
Yeah.
Doing the Lord's work, how can you not? But, you know, my kids, we're empty nesters. My kids all know how to handle themselves.
Art, thank you for the interview. It's been an honor.
Thank you very much.